Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Mad Mamluks podcast. My name is Sim. Along with me is my co-host, Sheikh Amr Saeed. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. We have a wonderful episode for you today. We have Brother Abdullah El-Haddad from the UK originally, and sorry, not originally, but you're Egyptian by ethnicity, but you resided in the UK at a certain point. He was formerly a representative of the Muslim Brotherhood in the UK in the, what year?
2013 to 2015.
Yeah, 2013. Yeah. So, well, we wanted to do an episode regarding Mohammed al-Morsi's passing. I don't know what you want to call it, a passing, and I find the whole situation very dubious, and we'll come back later to that, but we wanted an appropriate person to talk to regarding that, and one of our fans, he kind of overheard me say that on the side, and he put me in contact with Brother Abdullah here, and we are now best friends. No, but he's a very good dude. I really appreciate him joining us this afternoon here in Chicago, and you are in an undisclosed location that we will not reveal because of certain people who do not like him. Right? Let's just leave it at that. But Jazakallah khair for joining us. How are you, Brother Abdullah?
Alhamdulillah, I'm good. Jazakumullah khairan for taking the time. It's a very important topic, and the fact that, mashallah, you guys managed to reach international audience. I'm very happy to be here. It's very important for me to be here. Hopefully, inshallah, we're going to have a fruitful discussion. We're going to get some lessons out there, inshallah.
Yeah. Well, let's just start off with what, I guess, I don't know if it's still hot news, but the most recent news regarding Ikhwan al-Muslimin, aka the Muslim Brotherhood. It's the revelation that President Morsi was passed away after a trial. What were your initial thoughts when you heard that?
Since the military coup and Rabaa massacre specifically, it's been very difficult time for us, people who were there from the beginning, and people who witnessed the revolution from the beginning. We thought that the maximum level of oppression, the maximum level of cruelty in Egypt would be Rabaa massacre. We thought that after Rabaa massacre, when around 20 or 30,000 people were rounded up inside the prisons in Egypt, around Egypt, and then the number now reached 60,000. We thought that it's going to be the same probably as Mubarak, or maybe even before. But what's happened inside prison were much, much worse than anyone thought. For me, I thought that nothing else would shock me after what I've witnessed, after what I've seen, not just for my family members, my father and my brother, who are now inside prison, but also for other people, my friends and my relatives and everyone else that I know.
So just in case,
I was shocked.
Just in case the listeners has missed it, because you just mentioned that your father and your brother are in prison right now.
Yeah. I'll come back to that.
Yeah.
I'll come back to that. For me, President Morsi's death was a shock. I never thought that I would be shocked by something else that happened in Egypt, but it was a huge shock. I never expected it to happen. Although he's not the first to die inside prisons, and probably he would not be the last. President Morsi suffered from high blood pressure. He also had a heart problem. He had diabetes. He consistently asked for medical attention since the beginning of his imprisonment. He never had a serious medical examination since he entered prison.
And how many years was that? Just so we can remind the listeners, how many years was that he was in prison?
So this is from July 2013.
Yeah.
From now we're speaking about, I think, 6 years.
Yeah.
I mean, he's I think when he died he was 67 years old, if I'm not mistaken. It was a very difficult time for him. Every time he's in the court, he would ask the judge for a medical examination. He was trying to play by the rules of the game, and just respect at least the rules of the game and say, I'm asking you, just provide me with a doctor. I feel that I am being poisoned by the food. He actually said that I feel that I'm being deliberately targeted to at least physically collapse. And he complained about this many times. He only saw his family twice throughout the 6 years. What happened in the court during that day? So, to give you the context of my father and my brother, my father was the national security advisor for President Morsi. He was with him when the military coup happened in 2013. He, along with 8 other advisors, were rounded up with President Morsi. They refused to leave President Morsi alone, so the army decided to take them with him. And then they moved my father to a solitary confinement cell after 6 months, and since then he's been there. My brother was also the spokesperson for the Muslim Brotherhood back in 2011 to 2013. He was arrested in September 2013, 3 months after the military coup. And then, can you hear me?
Yes.
Am I still okay? Okay.
Yeah.
And then they moved my brother as well to the same prison where my father is, also in a solitary cell, which is called the prison called Akhra prison, or Scorpion prison. It's one of the worst prisons in Egypt, if not in the Middle East. Both my father and my brother were in the same court when President Morsi died. So they were in the same trial with him. It was the espionage trial. It's called espionage with Hamas. This is the trial brand. But also it includes many charges, different kind of charges. It has, the whole spectrum of espionage charges. So they're being accused of charge with Hamas, Hezbollah, Qatar, Iran, Israel, US, UK. My brother, for example, the evidence against him is espionage with Norway and Germany. So the idea is that this trial has like 35 senior guys from Freedom and Justice Party, from the Muslim Brotherhood, from people who are part of the Islamic movement.
Yeah.
And what happened is that majority of them are above 60 years old. So majority of them, they need medical attention. Majority of them, it's been very difficult for them throughout these 6 years. Majority of them are in solitary cell. And on that day, my father asked the judge to at least delay the sessions, because the sessions for that trial, the process of the session was accelerated by the judge. He wanted to finish this trial fast, so he decided to have a court session or a trial session every 2 days or on a daily basis. And that was very difficult for the detainees. So my father asked the judge to at least, make it every week, so we can at least take a rest. Because what happens is that they bring them from Fajr, so they transfer them from the prison after Fajr prayer, and then they leave them in the court inside the cage for at least 12 hours without food, without water, and then they move them back like at Al-Isha.
Now, are you in contact with them at all, or?
I'm not in contact with them at all. Just this is I can get to what's happening now in terms of communication, but there has been zero communication with my father and my brother since probably 2016. The only time that the family can communicate with them is during the trial court session by sign language, so they can see them inside the cage, inside the court.
Can you explain what do you mean by sign language? Like while the judge is speaking, they can just kind of wave to them and stuff like that.
Let me finish what happened to President Morsi.
Go ahead.
And I will go back to it, because the details of all of what's happening is horrific. So what happened is that my father asked the judge to delay the sessions, and then the judge refused to. He completely ignored it. After like 20 minutes, President Morsi started to speak. He made a very small speech, and he said that, again, he stated the fact that he is deliberately being targeted and something might happen to him. And then suddenly he collapsed. He collapsed inside his cage, inside the court. The cage that was designed for President Morsi was a very special cage. It's a cage where the only people who can see him are the people who are inside the cage, not the people who are outside. It was extremely difficult for the people outside the cage, inside the court, to see President Morsi. Also, the judge cannot see him. The only people who can see him are the other detainees. And President Morsi is separated all the times from other detainees. So the only people who saw him collapse was the other detainees inside the court cage, including my father and my brother. And then all of these guys started shouting and banging on the cage glass. He collapsed, something might happen to him, we need to save him. The officers, the police officers who were inside the court at that time, they completely ignored the calls and the banging and everything and the shouting. They thought he's just sleeping, or he's just fainted, and we were gonna go inside and fix him, and nothing would happen. But in the reality, he was physically dying at that moment, and there was a chance to save him. There was literally a chance to save him, maybe by doing some basic medical first aid. A doctor would have saved him easily. But the first thing they did is actually get everyone outside the courtroom. And then about the time they brought a doctor and they brought the ambulance, it was like 30 minutes after, 40 minutes after. And at that time, he collapsed, and when they moved him to the hospital, he died. But when it comes to my father and my brother, so as I said, my father was arrested back in 2013 along with President Morsi. They moved him to a solitary cell after 6 months in Skopje prison. My father is in the same prison. My father and my brother are literally in the same prison, but they cannot see each other. The only time they can see each other is inside the courtroom. So then you can imagine what are the conditions inside.
Well, were they part of Morsi's government, President Morsi's government?
Yeah, so my father was the national security advisor for President Morsi, but my brother was the Freedom and Justice Party spokesperson, or the Muslim Brotherhood spokesperson. He was mainly the point of contact for Western media, or international media specifically. He was very well known among diplomats, among international journalists, among politicians, and so on and so on. Both of them, since 2016, they haven't had zero communication inside the court with the family. So the only time the family can see them is actually when the trial session starts, and they go inside the courtroom and they want to communicate with them. But because the cage is fully isolated from outside, they use the sign language. So what happens is that they try to, for example, do some sort of a basic signs like, we are fine, how are you, how's everything going, do you need anything, how is the situation inside, tell them the news about my brother's son, his daughter, trying to update them with the family news, all these kind of basic discussion. And this is something that became famous now within all the court sessions, because the only time the families of the 60,000 people who are detained that communicate with them is actually during the trial sessions. When it comes to the situation inside the prison, so my brother, because he was that point of contact with the international media, he was a bit of a headache for Sisi after the military coup. Sisi's junta, the 3 months that followed up the military coup, he was constantly on different channels, CNN, NBC, BBC, Channel 4, the UK and the US mainly, also for the French media and for the Spanish media and Italian media and so on. He was probably one of the very few who's just number one point of contact and number one in terms of tweets, in terms of updating people with the news in English, because the fact that he was a spokesperson for the Freedom and Justice Party, and his English was very good, so it was very easy for the journalists to go and speak to him. And because of that, he was not a senior leader. He was not a senior member. He was not a decision maker. He was just someone who managed to get the message out. and he was rounded up in the prison as well. My father, he because the fact he was with President Morsi at that time, he was also considered as someone who's senior. Both of them are living right now in very horrific conditions. I can go in details, but
do you know how many people were imprisoned in that time frame after President Morsi was deposed?
Yeah, so when President Morsi was deposed, things were a bit hectic and chaotic. A majority of people who were against the coup at that time, they were in Rabaa Square. That was back in July 2013. And from July 2013 to 14th August 2013, when the Rabaa massacre happened, you had fairly hundreds of thousands out there. After that, after carrying out the massacre, they started rounding up people. At the beginning, the numbers that we received was about like 10,000 to 20,000. But right now, and this is documented by majority of human rights organizations around the world, including Human Rights Watch and Amnesty, the numbers reached 60,000 political prisoners inside Egypt prisons.
Now, I remember during the time of President Morsi's deposition, or when he was getting deposed, he had an opportunity to get asylum, and he chose not to. Was your dad and brother afford that same opportunity, or do you know? I know through like some back channels, at least that's what the media, some of the media reported, that there are
I don't think President Morsi had the opportunity for asylum.
Okay.
But I know, and it's a very well known. I know that many people had a chance to run away, including my father and my brother.
Yeah.
They were advised to run away, even by Western diplomats. They told them that the game is over, and this is the tricky part when it comes to someone who has a certain understanding of the cause and the Muslim Ummah and the whole ideology part.
Exactly.
Is that you pay there is a price and there is a some sort of I'm not sure what's the best way to describe it, but being pragmatic and just run away is a choice. It might not be the wrong choice, but not to run away and stand up against the injustice, against the Sisi's coup, against the dictatorship that will come, was for them the right choice. And I pray for Allah Azza wa Jal that Allah grants them the hasanat and the ajr, the thawab for what they did. Some people ran away. Some people left Egypt just, when the coup happened, they felt this is threatening, life-threatening. They run away. They try to settle outside. It's okay. It's fine. That doesn't mean it's a wrong choice, and this is the right choice. So this is the part where even President Morsi, from the beginning, he had the opportunity to say, "That's it. The game is over. I'm just gonna step down." And he decided not to. He said, this is the legitimacy. I'm going to stand for that. This is what I believe in. I'm going to stand for it. This is not really pragmatic politics at all. Some people would say he did the wrong thing. Might be. For him, the right thing to do is to stand against it and refuse to step down. And he paid the price for that. Even if we disagree with, I am someone, I didn't like many of his policies, and I felt that many things, there was a good opportunity to do something, but he couldn't. And I felt that there was a door to do something, but it didn't happen. But for me, and for me, President Morsi was not the ideal, perfect president. But for the fact that he paid and sacrificed himself for what he believed in, which is, what he believes in is a right thing. It's not a wrong thing. He believes in the fact that people has the right to choose, that people has the right to elect. He believes in the fact that the people has the freedom and the basic human rights, and he died for that. And they deliberately killed him for that.
Well, I know a lot of I know a lot of listeners are perhaps thinking, well, what benefit would be gained by him going to prison, or your father or brother or a lot of other people who had the opportunity to escape but did not? What is that proving?
That's always a tricky question. That's why I tell you, I don't judge anyone based on the choice they made, whether to run away or not. It's oppression, it's dictatorship, it's not a good story, it's not a happy ending. What my feeling and my understanding is that this is between every person and Allah Azza wa Jal and the decision they make. However, there's a very important point here, and I'm going to get to the example of what Arbakan did. Arbakan was Nekbeddin Arbakan,
right,
was the head of welfare party in Turkey. That was back in 1980s and 1990s. He was like the father of the Islamic movement in Turkey, like one of the founders of the early Islamic movement. His mentees, he was a mentor, and his mentees was Erdogan, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Abdullah Gül, and others. Najmuddin Erbakan in 1994, I think, in the early 90s, I can't remember exactly the date, there was a coup against him. There was a military coup. They asked him to step down, and he stepped down. His followers wanted to protest. His followers were seriously, considering carrying weapons and go against the army. He told them to leave. He asked them to leave, and he left them alone, and he went to his house in the countryside, and they actually arrested around 1,300 of his followers. But what he did saved hundreds of thousands of people from being rounded up and from being killed. What he did ultimately led to the fact that you had the AK Party or AKP, and then you had Turkey as we know at the moment. Was the right thing that President Morsi do that? Was the right thing that he stepped down? My idea is that we would never know, but what we know is that Sisi's or the military council at that time was very serious about eradicating the Muslim Brotherhood for one simple reason, and this is what we see at the moment, is the fact that you have regional powers like UAE, Abu Dhabi, Mohammed bin Zayed, and Saudi Arabia, who considered Muslim Brotherhood as a threat, and they were very serious about rounding up every one of them. So the fight was not going to end if President Morsi stepped down, but also if President Morsi took a different decision, we might have had a different kind of ending. I'm going to mention another example, which was what happened in Sudan last week. In Sudan, after the protest, there was some sort of a deal between the opposition and the military council. It was a very difficult deal for the opposition. They compromised a lot. Even after the massacre, they had this precondition for a deal to at least hold people who are responsible for the massacre accountable, but they compromised that. And they decided just, I'm going to take a step back, accept what the military wishes for. And for that, they managed to save lots of people. They managed to save themselves. They were a bit pragmatic. Was that many people are judging them for doing the wrong thing and for selling out the revolution, for selling out the people who died. I can't judge them. They might have done the right thing. For my father and my brother, I can't judge them as well. I'm waiting for them to leave and to hear their thoughts and to hear what they say about this. If I was in their position, I might have done different thing. But I feel at that time, it was, subhanAllah, it was the heat of the moment. It forces everyone to say, we're going to stand up against injustice.
Yeah.
There's also another point, is no one imagined that Rabaa massacre would happen. And that's a mistake. That's definitely a mistake. Not imagining that the army will kill you right down in the street, straight shot, with snipers and everything, modern air weapons. That was a mistake because if we remember, back in April 2013, there was a very similar massacre in Bangladesh. It was a very similar protest in Bangladesh. The army killed protesters in the street. There were very similar incidents if we look at the history, if we look at what happened in Mexico, if you look at what happened in Chile and so on.
Yeah.
So there was also a mistake of ignorance from our side, not being able to see the environment clearly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think obviously anyone could say that we wouldn't expect this to happen, but
the army had a lot of respect, right?
In specific in Egypt, people would never expect. Like, I was so shocked, even though I'm originally from India, I would know that would happen in India for sure. But But I would never, after living 7 years, almost 7 years in Egypt, and knowing the Egyptian people, I would have never thought that would happen. That's why it was such a big shock to me. Like, people don't realize it. They hear about sometimes the roughness of the prisons of Egypt. That's in all countries. But on the streets, people are a lot more different, right? And I never expected that to happen. Like, when I heard that, I was like, out of all places, Egypt, a massacre, like, that was too shocking. And so imagine, and you know, obviously you know this better than anybody else. We don't have to explain this to you, but the Egyptians obviously never expected those things in 2013 in the Rabaa massacre. They would never dream that innocent people would be gunned down by their army. They never thought that would happen.
Yeah, it's true. We never expected that. But you know, I was not in Egypt by the time. I was in the UK. I became a representative for the Muslim Brotherhood in 2013. And basically what happened is that there was no one else to speak on the media. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to get out there and try to do something.
Mashallah.
There were very few people who we managed as a team to do that. The idea is that I remember the night of the Rabaa massacre, I was having a discussion with a British Muslim who's very knowledgeable of history. And he was very serious, and he was telling me, tomorrow they're going to kill you all.
Really?
That was not the first time I heard that warning. Many people tried to advise us. Many people tried to warn us. So yes, Egypt probably is different in terms of the culture, in terms of that, you know, ordinary people, you know, we would never expect that. But the military is a military. The army man is an army man. It's the same structure, it's the same behavior, it's the same culture, whatever country that is. It's a lack of understanding maybe of this kind of military, because if you look at the timeline of the events, so there were 2 incidents before Rabaa that were very serious, where you had like 60 people killed in one day, and the other incident you had 100 people killed in one day. Some people, specifically analysts, were saying these were warning signs by the army. They were sending you a very clear signs. We're gonna kill you, and we don't care. We're gonna massacre you in the street, cold-blooded, in front of the camera, and we literally don't care. And there was these very serious warning signs. The army was sending very warning signs. Is it enough to say, you know, we didn't expect that? You know, after 6 years and after what I've seen, it's just we made that mistake. We were not that knowledgeable.
Well, what now? A lot of people, there's been a lot of second guessing since the fall of Morsi, the whole breakdown of democracy in Egypt. In regards to the future of where the Muslim Brotherhood goes from here, has there been a rethinking of strategy, at least in the political sense? A lot of people said, you know, because Morsi didn't break down the various state apparati that governed Egypt, this is why the things unfolded the way they did. He should have, removed the existing apparatus and perhaps utilized some key influential figures, but kind of done a hybrid so that he wouldn't have lost his support the way he did so quickly. Do you think there's any legitimacy in that? Maybe from a methodological perspective, the way the Brotherhood is approaching these situations in the future?
So in 2014, there was a poll, a polling by Zogby Foundation, or Zogby Center. It's an American-based polling organization. It's a very famous one. And they published results regarding the Muslim Brotherhood support around the Arab world. And in Egypt, that was in 2014, which is a year after the military coup, it was about 43%. It's not really support, but more of an acceptance and approval as a legitimate party or a legitimate organization. I'm not very worried. After all of what happened, I'm not that worried about the fact that the Egyptian people are like, oh, these MB people, this Muslim Brotherhood, these Ikhwanis, they did this and this and that. This thing will always be there, and the people who supported the Muslim Brotherhood, the people who are sympathizing with the Muslim Brotherhood are still there as well. It's an enough number now to be able to get back to the scene for the Muslim Brotherhood. The problem is not people who are outside the Muslim Brotherhood in terms of their ideas and so on. It's the problem of people who are inside. There are two inside the Muslim Brotherhood now. There are people who are inside Egypt and outside Egypt who managed to escape after the military coup. There was a split in the leadership back in 2014 and then in 2015. And there was some sort of an internal tension, usual. And that split till now is there, although it's not as balanced as before. You have like a dominant part, which is people who were the original leaders or the original seniors, and you had the other people who were like the new generation. That split was very serious. It was very serious inside Egypt, very serious outside Egypt, and it has a huge impact, negative impact. Because for the very fact that people inside Egypt, specifically people who had families who had members who are imprisoned, people who supported the Muslim Brotherhood who imprisoned too, or were killed or died by the regime. The problem is that these families, we were speaking about hundreds of thousands of people, they were psychologically damaged in a way that they might not be able to recover.
I'm sorry. Can I go back to the split real quick? What was the split regarding?
That too, yeah.
Sorry. Say again.
Yeah. What was the split regarding? I know a lot of movements and parties have splits, but what was this one regarding? Strategic differences or methodology? Or, I mean, you don't have to get into details, but I'm sure there's some.
It's not that everything is out there. It's not. I'm just going to try to give the most simple and accurate answer. It was more of a split of people who were responsible before the military coup, and they continued, and new people who thought they should leave because they were responsible. Bad things happened. You should leave. You should resign. So we have to have a new, fresh faces. That was mainly it. But there was also difference of ideas. There was also, when it comes, for example, to Morsi legitimacy, the new leadership, the new faction, felt that saying that Morsi is the legitimate president and we're gonna fight for him to be back in power is not practical, and this vision is gonna destroy everything that we're trying to do. So they felt like, let's focus on the people on the streets. Let's focus on how to do it the revolutionary way. And there is the original guy, the elders of some people would like to call them, who felt like the best strategy right now is the patient strategy. You just wait it out. Mm-hmm. This idea comes originally from what happened with Nasser, because Abdul Nasser, the first president of Egypt, the second president of Egypt after 1952 military coup or revolution, whatever you want to call it. He basically, when he rounded up all MB members inside prison in 1950s and in 1960s, the strategy was to wait it out, and it worked out. Nasser died, Muslim Brotherhood survived, we managed to get back to the scene. It will probably going to happen again. We can just wait it out, which it seems till now it seems it's working somehow.
Well, it's a legitimate political philosophy that many philosophers of the past said. When there's no clear direction, just wait until the path opens up. And I think it was Sun Tzu or someone who gave that kind of advice to a lot of leaders.
I don't know about that, but
go ahead.
But I know, like, after when people claimed when Anwar Sadat became president or prime minister, he made things a lot easier for if you want to say, the religious people, which means that they ended up, people claim this historically, that he was not as harsh as Jamal Abdel Nasser in some ways, which made it a lot easier for them to not be activists anymore, because there was no reason for activism anymore. Meaning there's always a reason for activism, but that's taken away. And I'll give you a small example. The methodology, even in some parts of Egypt and the Muslim world, of people being jailed in prison was much different. There was a guy I know who went to prison, and he came out of prison, and he said the prisons are so different. You could have your cell phones with you. We have PlayStation. They let us play soccer, and they do all this because they knew that when they were torturing us, then we became even stronger and much more rebellious. And then when we came out, we became more ferocious. But when we were in jail, they gave us everything we wanted, and then a lot of people just went off the deen. They didn't even care anymore because they were just had everything, using their cell phones, playing PlayStation, PS, and soccer and squash until they just got bored.
Yeah.
So that game exists already on the levels of the presidents also, right? As that the conniving nature of how they had tried to suppress, the Muslim Brotherhood. And all of these methods, even when you talked about the split, when you caused this turmoil in Egypt, and the people behind bringing, Muhammad Morsi, rahimahullah, were the Muslim Brotherhood, they knew that they were going to cause a split amongst the people because it's a state of confusion, right? They know all we have to do is cause this type of turmoil, and splits are going to happen because we're human beings, right?
If we look at the strategy from the beginning, and this is something that we learned like 3 years after the coup, on the night of the coup, not just the day, on the night of the coup, they arrested around 5 to 7 people. These were very strategic arrests. They arrested people inside MB, outside MB. They arrested Hassan al-Ismail, if you know, he was the Salafist leader. They arrested people from Wasat Party. Wasat Party were like a centrist party in Egypt, but they were closer to the Islamic movement, and they were anti-coup as well. And they arrested Khayrat al-Shatir, was a very well-known figure inside the Muslim Brotherhood at that time, and they arrested like a couple of, and they arrested the former head of the parliament and so on. So these 7 people, if you look at if anyone who's security analyst and like a counter terrorism analyst or counter crime or whatever, targeting the figures, the people who can connect all the dots together, would have this impact on the organizational structure. And we have seen that because he arrested the people who have the ability to accelerate the process of the decision making. And because he arrested them, now you have these different kind of senior leaders who are not able to be as fast as they should be, or not able to develop a certain strategy or a tactic that make things move smoothly. And it ended up not being able to lead the followers the way the others did before. And then the only thing that was clear for them is just wait it out. And that's why you had this new faction, because the new faction, when it came out, it was very clear that we can have a different strategy, different tactics. There was some sort of trying to speak in a very revolutionary way. Forget about the patient strategy. We're gonna take a serious steps. They were more willing to speak with other political parties. They were more willing to speak with the opposition. They were not willing to stand down, like, for example, had a discussion with these. And what happened after President Morsi is that this new faction, they released a statement and they said that we're not gonna, as Muslim Brotherhood, because they still consider themselves as the leadership of the Muslim Brotherhood, they said we are not going to engage in any political let's say, activity from that moment. We feel now it's the time to go back as before, to go back to the people on the street, to go back to charity work, to go back to social work, and to leave the politics aside, to go back to tarbiyah, to go back to education, to go back to halaqas and focus on that.
This is the group that split.
I mean, that split.
This is a younger group, right?
We'll give them our name. We'll call them the real Ikhwan.
It's not really that.
The OGs in the new school. Okay?
Usually what happens is after a lot of parties, after they split, I'm going to give a wink to a few parties out there. They call themselves the new one calls themselves the real, and then the name of the group. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
Those who know what I'm talking about are laughing.
Usually the old, I mean, sometimes you call them the old guys and the new guys.
Yeah.
Old school,
the elders and.
So when you were saying the people that wanted to get back into the charity work and help people on the street and halaqat and tarbiyah, that was the new school. That was the younger generation from the split.
Yeah, I mean, their statement was very clear. We are, this is not what we're going to do. We're just going to get back to what we need to do. But also they said we're going to keep fighting for the injustice.
Of course,
That's political instance. Because it's embedded within what happened with the revolution and the Ikhwan. So it became something that you cannot just run away. But again, the people inside Egypt are just, psychologically they collapsed, socially they collapsed, financially You have hundreds of thousands of people who just trying to survive a day by day. You have families who do not have a one single part of income. Families who were very rich, who had to had to sell their the furniture of their house, had to sell even their house to be able to have any source of income, to be able to survive that. So for them, they don't really care. They didn't care until now. They don't really care about that split. They don't care about the statement or strategy. They really care about survival. They're trying to survive a day by day. And the sad reality is, which is shocking, still surprising, is that till that very moment, they are still arresting new people. There's a cycle of arrest that's still happening. People who leave prison after they finish their sentence, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, they arrest new people. It doesn't seem it will go away. It's the Sisi's the regime and the Ministry of Interior, the Mukhabarat, the intelligence, the general intelligence, the military intelligence. It's the focus is there's like this some sort of a core focus of anything they do is how to finish the Muslim Brotherhood, and it seems that they are revising their strategies. They're taking these things very, very seriously till that moment. After 6 years of finishing up everyone, not just the Muslim Brotherhood, every single person. Even you have people who are former military generals who wanted to at least get back into the political scene, and they arrested them. They just finished everyone. They are still until that moment taking these things very seriously.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's just worth noting to our listeners. And this is the way since the beginning of Islam that the opponents of Islam have always viewed Islam entering into a political sphere. That because these type of people who see the Muslim Brotherhood and see them as a existential threat to their world, they're very corrupt people. They're people who are afraid of losing what they have, right? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think which gives people clarity. Just last week I was talking to people that were much older than myself, and a lot of Muslims, unfortunately, in the West, they don't realize what this dilemma is with Muslim Brotherhood. Some of them actually think that it's an extremist group. So I think within 10 to 15 minutes, or maybe less than that, we can kind of give an understanding what the Muslim Brotherhood is and where it became now in 2019 and why there's opposition. I'll give you a small example, all right?
Yeah.
People claim that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Mushrikeen in Mecca kicked him out because they didn't like him, which was false. They loved him. He put the stone in the Kaaba. That's how much they trusted him. They considered him to be the purest. And people claimed, even though Rasulullah, he said that I came to fulfill the best of akhlaq, right? Meaning in the section in our deen, or the compartment of akhlaq, he came to complete it, meaning that akhlaq existed amongst the Arabs and he came to bring a higher level of it, right? A much more optimal level of it. But he wasn't kicked out of, intended to be kicked out of Mecca or rejected from Mecca because he was inviting to good akhlaq. There was another reason. And the reason I'm bringing this back to Muslim Brotherhood is people know Muslim Brotherhood for charities and hospitals. Even when I was in Egypt, when I was sick a few times, I went to Rab al-Adawiyya, the hospital that's connected to the masjid. I went there a few times, right? In 2009, 2010, I went there. I took my family there too. Because it had a nice environment, nice aura. Everyone there is, it's not your average hospital. But that's not the reason why the government does the government dislike the Muslim Brotherhood because they do charity work and the government's not doing it? No, that's not the reason why. There's another reason why that the Muslim Brotherhood is labeled by the current government as terrorists, but they're actually not. So the original da'wah of Sheikh Hassan alBanna, rahimahullah, and I know that the da'wah has changed, the methods changed, I get that. But in the late 1930s, right? Let's talk about the point. Why was Hassan alBanna on the scene in the first place? What was he doing? Why was he there?
I'm gonna again try to put this as simply as possible.
Yeah.
Without all the complexity.
Yeah. And this is just to give the people an understanding of why Muslim Brotherhood is despised by the government.
Basic understanding of why a Muslim Brotherhood would be there. I just don't want to emphasize on the Muslim Brotherhood, but why there would be a Muslim organization that would engage into politics.
Yes, why was activism
in a very
required?
Serious way. Yeah, and not, yeah, in a very serious way that would make them pay such a price around the world, whether just in Egypt or any other country. It comes back to the understanding of al-amr bil-ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar. What's the best translation for that in English?
Encouraging the good and forbidding the evil, for instance.
Yeah, encouraging the good and forbidding the evil. This understanding comes originally from the Quran and the Sunnah. That كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر ولتكن منكم أمة
يدعون إلى الخير
يدعون إلى الخير ويأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر. So the Quran says there has to be a group of people or a movement or some sort of a sphere of people who are encouraging the good, forbidding the evil. The scholars, and I will try to quote Imam Al-Ghazali, Al-Hamd Al-Ghazali. When it comes to this topic, it's an extremely sensitive topic because it goes back to everything in life. It goes back to the social, to what's happening in social life, to economy, to society, to culture, and everything. Who should be responsible for that? And this idea stopped in terms of being, in terms of going through the evolution process. It stopped when the Khilafah stopped. The idea is it the state that is responsible for encouraging the good, forbidding the evil, or is it the people, right? And that this kind of understanding, there was different kind of factions inside the Islamic scholars who, some of them thought that, the right thing is to leave it for the state, and others thought, the people has to take action. We have seen many stories from the Salaf of stories about people who were drunk inside the Muslim cities. How were they drunk? Where was the state? Who was responsible? Why did the people leave them drunk? Where did they drink? Where did they drink the wine? When the Khilafah stopped, Hassan al-Banna idea originally was just, there has to be, and I'm gonna go to another topic, which is the conspiracy theory part, but Hassan al-Banna believed that there was a legitimate threat against Islam.
Yes.
And we have to stand for Islam.
He thought it was going to vanish, right? Which is why he went
thought,
to the bars to get
Islam
Muslims out of the bars if they were there.
There has to be like some sort of a vanguard against Islam. Now, it came out to, okay, how are we gonna do this? Okay, we're gonna start our organization. This organization will be in the forefront of that, because he believed that the regime is not going to, or the state at that time is not doing anything about it.
Yeah.
And then when 1948 was also another turning point, or what happened in Palestine. With the fact that it's very clear that this idea of a plan, that this master plan against Islam is happening. There was one issue for that. There was one issue is that at that time there was an extreme lack of knowledge inside Egypt and other Arab countries and even Muslim countries when it comes to understanding specifically of the Western powers, when it comes to understanding of Britain imperialism and other countries in France and Italy and so on. I remember Sayyid Qutb, I was reading a history book written by one of the followers of Sayyid Qutb and senior member of the Muslim Brotherhood. And this was the history of the 1965 Muslim Brotherhood organization and how it managed to revive itself after Nasser oppression. And on the list of Sayyid Qutb, so Sayyid Qutb was the one responsible for Tarbiyah inside the Muslim Brotherhood at that time, and he had a list of books that his followers need to read. And one of these books was Protocols of Zion. Right. We know now for a fact that this book is just a fake book. It has fake content. It was originally faked by the Russian Empire, and then the Americans took it to fight out the Jewish companies, and then other countries used it, and then it reached the Arab world. It was translated into Arabic, and then there was this huge conspiracy theories that the Jews are controlling the media, the economy, the banks, everything around the world. They're going to try to destroy this and this and that. So you have this embedded culture of a serious conspiracy theories that make you feel like whatever this states or regimes doing, this Islam is being under threat in a way that we have to do this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I still believe, and obviously my ideas change since I was very young. I was engaged heavily with the Islamic movement, not just the Muslim Brotherhood, but other Islamic movement as well. One of the things that I have seen is that because that we have this lack of understanding of how does the state work, and how does from above, from the serious understanding of economy, the serious understanding of politics, how ideas were progressed by human beings throughout the history, specifically since the fall of the Khilafah, and how our ideas stopped within the fall of the Khilafah, and how we don't have this ability to make these serious comparisons, progressive comparisons. Every time we try to make comparisons, when we were in Egypt, we always draw the lessons from the Sahaba, which is the right thing. It's not a wrong thing to do, to draw lessons from what the Sahaba did. But when it comes to comparing the state of Sayyidina Abu Bakr with the current state, a national state like that, it doesn't work that. I remember people were making comparison, and still now they're making comparison between what President Morsi did and what Sayyidina Uthman ibn Affan did. With all of the differences, this is where we draw our conclusions and our comparison, and I don't think that's healthy. I don't think that's healthy at all. And that's why people are calling Muslims, sometimes even conservative Muslims, religious Muslims, they call Muslim Brotherhood extremists because of that part. I want to go back to the point that that's why the Muslim organization exists. It's just encouraging good, forbidding the evil. But because of that lack of understanding of how state works, how modern state works, how economy now works, all of these things are complex and complicated ideas and philosophies, that it's whether we like it or not, it became part of our daily life. How can we change all of that? Then we have to do something about it.
Of course.
That's why you had different groups that came out from the Islamic movement. You had the Salafis, who had their own understanding, their own philosophies. You had the Sufis, who had their own understanding, so the modern Sufis, or the new Sufis, I like to call them. And you had Tabligh, for example, who had their own understanding. I remember at the beginning, back in the days when I was very young, for me that was like, this is all wrong. The Salafis, they're not doing it the right way. They're focusing on only masjid. Outside the masjid, there's nothing. Look at the Sufis. I mean, to be honest, before the revolution, before 2011, the Sufis were very good. I mean, we used to listen to all of these scholars and Habib al-Jafri and so on. But after the military coup and after Rabaa, it was like a bit shocking how far they went afterwards. Whether it's right or wrong, I still believe it's wrong, but the idea is that they changed their philosophies. You had Tabligh, which is still a very influential Muslim movement around the world. Their philosophy is still working. They're still working for the good of the people. Now, before that, I used to believe that no, this is just wrong. They're doing it wrong. Nothing will change doing it that way. But in the reality now, things became a bit chaotic and hectic in a way that you don't get to judge any of these guys.
Yeah.
But why Muslim Brotherhood? Why has the Egyptian government from the 1940s or late 1930s up until 2019, why does it despise the Muslim Brotherhood when the Muslim Brotherhood just wants to? And that's what I mean by this, is if it's just Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar, that's a good thing. Why is the government so angry with the Muslim Brotherhood?
Okay, there are many reasons for that. First of all, if there is a democracy, if a Muslim Brotherhood exists in a democracy, its ideas will change rapidly.
Yeah.
The very fact that the Muslim Brotherhood fights the way it fights in Egypt, I don't want to speak about what happened in other countries, but I think the Tunisian experience is very important to mention. But when it comes to Egypt, there was always an injustice and oppression against the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood was more of the way it acted was more of a reactionary. We didn't go underground because we liked to go underground. It didn't happen that we went underground because they were arresting anyone who would at least say he was Muslim Brotherhood.
Yeah.
And it was very difficult to have a normal life for saying you're a Muslim Brotherhood. So there was from the state, and the state here is mainly because we need to look at the history of the Egyptian state itself and how since Muhammad Ali in the early 80s, late 70s, it went to become a military state, and a military based state where the military controls many things, and it ended up with Nasser's era where literally the military controlled huge portion of the economy, and how that state, when it became non-functional in terms of a normal progressive state when it compares to other countries, because of what the military is doing and how it's embedded within different institutions and how far it controlled that. So again, this is why the Muslim Brotherhood reacted that way. This is why Muslim Brotherhood acted that way. If we look at the case of Tunisia, right now there's no Muslim Brotherhood in Tunisia. There are people who carried out the cause of al-amr bil ma'ruf and nahy anil munkar, and their ideas progressed after the repression of Ben Ali regime back in Tunisia. And then when there was a window of freedom and democracy, a window for human rights, they had different kind of philosophy. We see them willing to practice politics the way we know politics. They became for example, their understanding of how state works, how they interact with different kind of institutions inside Tunisia. It became different. For me, I like that model. I think that model is healthy. I think that model is nice. I think it's a good role model of what al-Nahda did. But my colleagues, I have colleagues who doesn't like, who thinks that Nahda compromised. So
yeah, I wanted to say that you know, I think there's a lot of Islamist movements who are extremely critical of how they were, you know, they were so willing to be pragmatic with the other party in Tunisia, and I think that that's something that you know, only time will tell. But at least, I
mean, till now, what time is telling us it's going okay, it's doing good.
Well, in terms of preserving peace, but in terms of ideas, one of the, you know, a lot of the listeners of this podcast know I used to be affiliated with Hizb ut-Tahrir, and we were very critical of Ikhwan's culturing process, that you guys would always be wavering, and that the students of the Ikhwan, they're always they don't, you would hear different things from each person, and I think I don't know what what are your thoughts regarding that?
I definitely. I mean, the level of the spectrum inside each organization differentiates the spectrum of ideas. Yes, you can speak to a Muslim Brotherhood member and he will tell you something, a certain kind of philosophy, and you speak to another one, he will tell you something different. Inside the Muslim Brotherhood, it's a very interesting organization. It has leftists, it has people from the right, it has people from the left, it has socialists, it has neoliberals. I remember I was having a discussion with a history professor from the UK, and he was telling me and he was a leftist, and we disliked the Muslim Brotherhood because they had neoliberal ideas. So it's a bit of irony. So yeah, and this is also one of the interesting things, and maybe one of the successful things that the organization did. It managed to contain all of these ideas in a more of a healthy way. We did not feel that the differences before the revolution, but after the revolution, obviously, you had people who had clear leftist ideas or socialist ideas, but also you had people who had clear, capitalist ideas, companies and how to run companies and so on. When it's comparing to other organizations, whether it's Hizb ut-Tahrir, whether it's any other one, there's the spectrum is a bit is more. I don't want to say binary, but the colors are much less than the ones in the Muslim Brotherhood. And you had very specific understanding and very specific kind of strategy, clear vision. I mean, Hizb ut-Tahrir had a very, very clear vision, very, very clear strategy. All of them probably were saying the same thing. This is with my readings and my understanding. I never interacted with Hizb ut-Tahrir members.
Oh, really?
Wow. Yeah, never. I only read about them, but I never interacted with any of their members. But the idea, what I have felt is that they had very, very clear things that happened in their mind. That doesn't exist in the Muslim Brotherhood. Again, it's the idea of al-amr bil ma'ruf and nahy anil munkar goes into politics.
Yes. And the reason why I brought this up is to give it direction. Sorry to cut you off. Is, to bring it back full circle, is the reason why Mohammed Morsi and the examples of your father and your brother is because they have a vision, right? And there's certain people who don't like that vision. It's almost like an international thing. And the reason why I brought Sheikh Hassan alBanna up is because he had a vision. Forget about the misinformation that maybe he's been given. But in the late 30s, he knew that the only way that these problems can be solved is through the people who are responsible, the people who have power, the people like the government, right? And it's their responsibility to take care of their people, because that's the fastest way for something to get done, right? Look how fast Sisi just changed the landscape, even though it's evil.
Yeah.
But it's only the people who are responsible for a country can make rapid changes, right? Now, the reason why we love the brothers from Muslim Brotherhood is, even though they're not in power, they do whatever they can to help the people on the street. But that's what we consider kind of like an emergency situation. The people have to take care of people regardless. But on a large and a mass scale, the only people that can do it are the people who are in charge and the people who are leaders of a country, right?
Yeah.
But bringing it back to the original point is that the people, anyone who associated with that idea and the vision of bringing Islam back, as you said, Amr al-Ma'ruf and Nahy al-Munkar, in a very natural state, in a very natural way of living, that threatens everybody. Just like Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam threatened the Quraysh and the Mushrikeen al-Makkah. They loved him. They loved his akhlaq. They loved his ideas. They loved that he helped people. But he had an idea. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had an idea that eventually everything is going to be, as you said, by Amr al-Ma'ruf and Nahy al-Munkar, not judged by us, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And I think that's where the original seeds have been sown as hate. And that's why I just want to tell the general Muslim public and those brothers that I was speaking to last week and 2 weeks ago, is that, it's labeled, the Muslim Brotherhood is labeled as an Islamist group. But the original vision is an Islamic vision, right? That if our people who are responsible, they're not doing what they're supposed to, we have to intervene and tell them and remind them of Allah, remind them of Rasulullah, this is how you're supposed to be running the flock that you now assume to be a shepherd of, right?
It's a calling to change paradigm.
Yeah.
But the paradigm.
So there are two points here just I want to make. So the first one is that I completely agree that this was the philosophy, and it differentiates from Hassan al-Banna to Sayyid Qutb afterwards. So Hassan al-Banna, he had discussions with politicians. He spoke with the government. He spoke with the ministers. He was very active when it comes to dealing with the governments. He probably did not have the same kind of experience and as for example a minister or a prime minister, the same kind of experience when it comes to understanding of how economy works or how.
But he was trying his best. He
was trying his best, and he that's why he was very serious when it comes to violent attacks against them, because he felt like this is not a binary. This is not a state on a non-state actor against a state actor. No, this is we part of that state, and we're trying to reform it.
Giving them nasiha, right? That's what it's supposed to be.
Exactly. But when the oppression happened afterwards, and then when they assassinated him, and then when Sayyid Qutb went through this kind of different ideas and philosophy, saying, no, this is not a state that is trying to reform, or this is a state that is trying to oppress. But the ideas of Sayyid Qutb, even if people took it, to the extreme way, and now you have jihadist group who, took it to a different kind of level.
Of course,
you had people inside the Muslim Brotherhood who took part of it, but also tried to have, to progress the idea along with other ideas as well. You had different version when it comes to the third murshid of Ikhwan, the third head of Ikhwan, was Omar al-Misani. I think it's the third, not the fourth, but hopefully it's the third. He was there when Sadat was there, right? He used to be very famous inside Egypt. Sadat used to bring him in his conferences. He used to sit on the first line in front of Sadat. He used to have like an argument with Sadat, a president of the country. So the core belief, and this is what I felt from all the discussion I had with Muslim Brotherhood, the core belief is that we will never be this binary situation where we are against the state, but we will always be in discussion with them and reform with them. That obviously might change with Sisi, because Sisi looked to it as a binary thing. This is either us or them. But the core philosophy of Ikhwan is not that. The other problem is, and this is something that we started to figure it out, is that what version of Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar are you going to go for? Let's be very clear here. When it comes to extremist groups, when it comes to jihadist groups, they have the vision of an Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar. They are very serious about it. When we look at what Taliban did back in Afghanistan, this is a version of Al-Amr bil-Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar. When we look at, if we look at what happened in Saudi Arabia, I mean, before Nicki Minaj and everything, but you know, that was a vision.
By the way, she rejected to go there, so it's a
Yeah, I
smack in
know, I know,
MBS's
yeah.
face. I'm so happy.
Just for their fair, to be fair. You know, look at Saudi Arabia. That's their vision of al-amr bil ma'ruf and nahy anil munkar.
Yeah.
So which version are you going
You're
to
right.
follow?
You're right.
Do we have, is there a, the problem is there a version? And to be honest, I think that there is no right version that we have at the moment.
I mean, nobody's
At
practicing it
least-
right now. Yes.
Yeah, no one is practicing, at least in
Yeah.
the Middle East. And that, I believe, is because of the lack of understanding of the concept of the modern state.
Agreed. Yeah.
I sincerely believe that the only Muslim groups or organizations who would be able to develop that right understanding is the Muslims in the West. Why?
Why do you think so?
Because they are the ones who lived in the West, took the ideas, these modern ideas, these progressed ideas, people who managed to learn how did these ideas started. When we look at Adam Smith, who, for example, Adam Smith is one of the first economists. You know, they call him the father of economy, and he had this the father of capitalism or
Yeah.
whatever. He took some of his ideas or most of his ideas from Ibn Khaldun, right? Ibn Khaldun is like the father of sociology.
Right.
Yeah.
So, because when we study these ideas in economy, in politics, in culture, in society, we take what is granted. We don't look at the history of it. But what I have felt, I've been now living outside Egypt, specifically in the West, for like 6 years. What I have felt from interacting from European Muslims, British Muslims, American Muslims, is that they have this kind of understanding much better than us. So when they look to our ideas, they are critical in a very positive way, in a very progressive way. I see that door and hope. I have that hope, and I see that door, and I think there is a very credible opportunity that Muslims in the West are able to develop a very practical model and version of how there can be the concept of al-amr bil ma'ruf and nahy anil munkar, and how the concept of a state which is currently in that world. But
How
obviously,
you're saying how the state would be a vehicle to practice.
To
Yeah.
practice. How would it be the pinnacle of
to
Amr bil
deliver.
Ma'ruf and Nahy Anil Munkar? How can the
yeah,
state
how
be
can
a
we do
pinnacle
that? How
of?
can we contain the different kind of versions of al-amr
Yeah.
and nahy anil munkar?
Yeah.
You know, to look at how, you know, different states or the way ideas evolved. Now we can fairly assume that democracy is, you know, at least the last right version of how states should work. It provides rights to the people, and it somehow established the idea of freedom, human rights, and justice, which is a main fundamentals in Islam. in the
You mean
state
as of
well.
right now, the best form of justice we can kind of see on the surface level would be democracy out of everything that we've seen so far.
But obviously, when we look at democratic states right now, it has its pros and cons. You know,
Yeah,
it's not
and that's
just,
always
well,
gonna-
this
yes,
is not
of
the
course.
ultimate deal. This is what we should look
Of course, no. We know you're saying that as of right now, out of all the
Yeah.
regimes that are out there, it seems the only one out of the bunch, it seems to be that democracy can be the most fair and the most
It
just.
seems
Yeah.
a democratic state it's you know, at least for me, this is the right version. I can look at other versions. I can look at let's say Qatar, for example. It's just a very nice version, very nice city. You know, it's a state. There's no democracy. It's a kingdom. You have an emir, you have a prince. It's, you know, the older version of states. It's doing fine. There are human rights and issues, and, you know, there's no like something wrong about it. But is that the version what we seek for? Is there something called the right version? We don't know. Subhanallah. Yani, the Quran and the Sunnah, when it comes to politics, yani Rasulullah, it comes to he did not provide us with that clear thing. He provided us with pillars of a state. Shura, for example, having or justice or things that has to be there. But he did not provide us with the model that, because why? Because it's an ijtihad of us. He let us make that ijtihad of how can we progress and how can we develop that model. There is a very famous book, maybe you heard about it, from Professor Abdullah El-Haddad, which is called The Impossible State.
Oh, yeah.
And he criticized, you know, heavily the idea of the Muslim state in the minds of Islamists, or in the minds of people who believe in the Islamic movement. It's very fair criticism. Again, we as people who, you know, living in the Middle East, We do not have the proper education. We do not have the language, English, which is the dominant language of academia at the moment. We do not have mentors. We do not have teachers. And eventually, we are not being able to develop. So when I sit down with someone who's living in the US and tells me we are waiting for solution or the model to rise from the Middle East, forget about that. It's never gonna happen. Never gonna happen. We do not have that opportunity.
So I mean, I know I don't want to get too far away from the topic. We'll come back to the topic of the jails and what's happening as of right now in your communication with your father. And we ask Allah Subhanahu wa Taala to make everything easy for your family and your father and your brother, because it's amazing to see you're talking with smiles, and it's Allah Subhanahu wa Taala give you a lot of strength, man. I mean, if I was in your situation, I don't know, I wouldn't even be talking to people on the media. I'd be like, who the heck are these jokers trying to talk to me on the podcast while my family's suffering? I'm being honest with you. So may Allah reward you. That's something beautiful we see about the Egyptian people too, man. They have a lot of tahammul, quwwat al-tahammul. They have a lot of sabr for whatever's happening, and sometimes you can't even tell from their faces what's happening. So we ask Allah Subhanahu wa Taala to increase you in that and your family and make everything easy for them. With that being said, I think that the Muslim world, and Egypt in specific, has all the brilliant minds that the world can offer. And I'm not rebuttaling you. I'm not differing with you. I think we're both talking about the same thing, but I'm just choosing different words. I think that all of the understandings politically and religiously are all existent in the Muslim world, and people want khair, people want good. And the reason why some of these extremist groups have flourished is because they feel like their voice is not being heard, and there's other powers outside that are meddling into the business of these countries, and their own government is siding with other countries, right? For instance, one of the biggest criticisms just on a monetary level of Hosni Mubarak was that he was selling natural gas to Israel for such a cheap price when that could have been sold to somebody else or for even more, and the people could have benefited from that money, right? That's just a small example, right? So the people see this and they think there's no way out. If our leader's not going to help us, no one is. We got to take matters into our own hands. And that's where the extremism jargon actually starts its movement, is because, and that's how they get a lot of youth and a lot of younger people, is because they feel like their voices aren't heard. And as a human being, you have to be heard, right? On the flip side, there's people who say that you shouldn't be political, is because they don't want anything to change. They're fine the way they are, so they don't get involved politically. But then there's a middle path, right? There's a middle path that sees what's happening. They can see the games. They know what's happening, but they're powerless. So I want to rephrase what you said. I think that everybody knows what's happening. They know what to do. But there's many, this is where what you're talking about now, is political influences that are not going to allow that change to happen, because they have a vision not only for their own country, but for the entire world. For instance, I'm not going to mention any names. There's a power that will say, we need Egypt to be powerful and strong so we can protect the borders of Israel. And we're going to support that government, that regime, to make sure no one can infiltrate. Right?
Are you talking about Saudi Arabia?
Saudi Arabia may be a part of it, maybe. Right? Maybe the United States. You never know, right? So there's a lot of people involved, right? There's a lot of players involved. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because there's still some people that believe that, Israel, they push one button and the whole world is destroyed. That's what Indian uncles used to talk about in the 80s.
We came from like a Islamist background, right? So whenever we talk about Khilafah and the rise of the Muslims again, it's like, you morons, they're gonna push one button and everyone's gonna die.
Israel runs America. Israel's tells America what to do. But anyways, so that being said, the reason I mention all this is that I think, even as far as people who understand politics, a lot of people disagree with a lot of his views. But for instance, when I was there, Dr. Salim Al-Awa, right? Oh boy. He you heard that name before?
Yeah.
Good. So a lot of
I have no idea who he is.
But for instance, look, he had a very, very good understanding of politics. People disagree with some of his views or whatever the case is. I don't care. I loved him, and I loved him very much. I used to attend some of his durus. I'm not afraid to mention that. But
I think for our audience, maybe we can make like an American comparison.
Yeah.
Doctor, I don't think there is any. There's nobody that sharp. There's nobody that sharp. He's a very sharp dude.
He might be like he's a bit leftist, but he's also
a bit leftist. But he's a lawyer. He's an attorney. Yeah, he's an attorney. He's very fast in his thinking, and he's very bright in that sense. Yeah, he has some. Like I said, everyone has their own ideas.
He was a presidential candidate as well.
Yeah, he was. He was a presidential candidate. And a lot of people were excited about him too.
For what country?
For Egypt. Dr. Salim Al-Awa, yes.
Okay,
so
I've been scraping around a few countries.
No. So what I'm saying is all the brilliant minds are there, right? I think it's just the power and the tension that's on and focused on the Muslim Ummah for so many hundreds of years to bring them to the level that they are to now, right? So, and I think everybody, even on the scholarly level, when you study fiqh, and you've heard of the likes of Imam al-Mawardi, there's a lot of these books that are written, on how to conduct yourself as a ruler, and all those that are there in the books of fiqh, but they're very theoretical now because they haven't been practiced in a long time, right? Yeah. And again, I'm not saying what you're saying is wrong. I think I'm just elaborating.
How about okay? Salim Al-Awa is like now 70 years old, in his 70s. I cannot mention any new example of someone. I need someone. I respect the people, the elders. I need someone in his 40s to tell me what needs to be done, so I can follow him. I need a leader.
No, of course. One. I think everybody's looking for a leader. I think the whole Muslim world is starving for a good leader. But
I need a scholar. So for example, let's speak about Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi.
Yes.
He's a scholar. He had mashallah many ideas. He's probably one of the first people who said, forget about engineering, forget about medicine, just go to the serious stuff right now. Go to the media, go to the economy, go to the politics, go to philosophy, and try to understand, try to anchor the understanding of how to integrate, and not integrate, but the framework of Islam when it comes to these things. But again, there is no one.
And I agree with you. There's nobody. That's the problem.
And this is a huge gap when it comes to my generation. I mean, I'm in my 30s, and there's my younger brother. He's like 18 years old, and you have other people who are still young. And imagine by the time they grow up, there will be no Salim Al-Awa, there will be no other scholars who Yusuf al-Qaradawi and others. Who are they going to listen to?
You're right.
The only place where I can think that it might produce such scholars. I mean, I know many people who listen to American preachers, American dua. I can't remember the names, but Americans or Europeans or British. But they are, may Allah reward them. They are preachers. They are dua. They are not. They are not
politically minded.
Sorry?
They're not politically minded.
They're not
politically minded.
They're not ready to assume leadership of people, right? That's true. I mean, they're good.
What I'm currently looking for, I'm currently looking for someone like a professor at Harvard who, who's not an Islamist, but someone who has the right understanding of
course,
of the understanding of Islam in a way that he would be able to develop as such a framework that would work for us as Muslims.
Yes.
Because as a Muslim, I don't want to compromise on my values to tell me to be practical or pragmatic. I want to keep I believe at the end of the day, I'm going to stand alone in front of Allah Azza wa Jalla, and I wish that Allah Azza wa Jalla, would approve my case. That's the end of this. What I need. That's what I hope for.
We have the minds, but I think we have a lot of people who are scared. Pressure, yeah. They have the public eye on them. They don't want to be pigeonholed 10 years from now from what they said at the current time, based on something that can be very much categorized as in interpretation.
That's very bad. I mean, you scare, and you are like living in the US or Britain.
I like what you said. Look what he said. This guy is so honest. He said people are living in the US and they're scared, and he's laughing at that.
I know it is.
I love that.
Funny. No,
I love that you're laughing at
it's
that.
It's a very observant thing because it's something I say it a lot.
He said. Sim said the other day, if the people outside of America knew how we were living, they'd come and kill us to know how easy it is here.
not to say that everyone has it easy. I'm just saying, in terms of the upper middle class here, they have it pretty well. Really, they have it.
Yeah, and the U.S. case, the American Muslim case, is much different than what's in Britain and Europe, and the numbers from, if you look at different academia, they'd say that the kind of the scholarship and the education, the academia within the Muslim community in the U.S. is much higher. So You
on a
know,
percentage level, yeah.
if someone is out there and is like gonna study something, so keep that in mind and try to develop something for us. But I also want to get to the point, and maybe it's a different point, which is the fact that what's happening to the Muslim Brotherhood at the moment, and also the Islamic movement in the Middle East is going to affect the Muslim communities in the West, specifically in the US and Europe. And maybe we can go deeper in that topic and the possible designation of Muslim Brotherhood. But should we go to that topic?
Yeah, because they're already being labeled over here as extremists now too. So
I think I just want to bring that topic, and because it's a very serious thing. And when we look at the current administration, and when we look at what's happening with Trump and other people inside his cabinet. When we look at the history of who the ones that influenced him, I remember in the hearing of Mike Pompeo, someone asked him about Frank Gaffney Institute, I think Center for Security and Policy, something like that. Frank Gaffney is very famous for being the father of anti-Muslim conspiracy theory. He's one of the first people to bring up this conspiracy theory that the Muslim Brotherhood is trying to take America and to establish Sharia law. And his institute actually awarded Mike Pompeo. So it's a very serious thing when we look at any possible designation of MB. It's not really about MB. It's more about what's the Muslim organization here in the US. I think Bridge Foundation, which is part of Georgetown, they did some very serious work about that, warning about the fact that this is not about Egypt. This is not about what's happening in the Arab world or the Middle East. This is about what's happening in the US. It's about the fact that you have far-right groups or Islamophobic groups who are working very hard to undermine Muslim organizations, specifically the ones that are engaged into politics, specifically the ones who are trying to make al-amr bil ma'ruf and nahy anil munkar, but in a very general way, in a very humanitarian way. And they want to make sure that these organizations are closed. I'm someone who, I never lived before the military coup. So what happened is that in 2013, I started my master's degree abroad. So I left Egypt, and I was very hopeful. So I'm just going to finish my master and come back, I'm going to build this country. When I left, subhanAllah, the coup happened, and I couldn't come back since then. It's been 6 years since I've seen my family members. When I was out there, and I see that the amount of work that can be done in Muslim countries, within the Muslim communities in the West, in Britain, in Europe, in the US, is huge. The amount of opportunities is huge, and the amount of work that people who are Islamophobic or people who are from the far right who are working against these Muslim community organizations is also huge. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's a fact that you have adversaries who are trying to shut you down. You might end up, being labeled in the media or whatever. So when we speak about people who are scared to be on the spotlight, okay, I mean it's politics. You need to be careful. You need to be sensitive about what you say, about who you appear with, about your comments, about your messages. But also you need to be proactive. Being reactionary in a world, in a state which is respect your activisms, is a very, very un-Islamic way to do. When I see Muslim faces contributing in different political campaigns for different candidates or what's currently happening, it's for me it gives me hope. I'm being very serious. I'm not trying to compliment or anything, but it really gives me hope because when we see these models, for us, it's a very serious model, something that, someone who managed to be able to conserve his values and to be able to hold them, and at the same time being politically active in a non-Muslim environment, and to be able to reach a level where it can achieve a positive impact on a community, a very diverse community where you have Muslims, you have Christians, you have Jews, we have atheists, and all of that, and to be able to achieve all of that and move forward, that's very, very, very good. That is something that we have never seen before, and unfortunately, this is normal because of the timeline that the new generation now in the US and in the West this is the generation where it needs to show us some role models, needs to show us something that we can feel like, okay, you know what, there's still some hope. Because I am someone who used to follow up many scholars, used to, you know, kiss the hands of many shuyukhs. I stopped doing that. I was, when I have seen that they have a limit of, you know, what they do, and there are many things that they need to know and they need to do and they don't know about it, and they misjudging it because of their lack of knowledge. I cannot say, you know, this is the scholar that I'm going to follow. I'm sorry. Being a scholar, when we look at the scholars of back in the days, you know, Abi Hamid al-Ghazali, Ahmed ibn Hanbal, and other imams, these people carried out the ideas of their age, of their century, not just the Muslim ideas, but the ideas were outside. When we look at how Imam al-Ghazali, at least, you know, whether he would say right things or wrong things, but in fact he went that far to make sure he would be able to, you know, contain all of these ideas and to try to counter, to present counter arguments and try to develop the right model. There's a very interesting book called Hakada Dhaharajil Salah ad-Din, which is this is how the generation of Salah ad-Din were developed, or I'm not sure how did raise up. And it goes through the history of what Imam Abi Hamid al-Ghazali did, and the tarbiyah and the education schools that he managed to establish, and how the next generation will follow his mentees that mentored another mentees, and it ended up with that. It was a chain of education and tarbiyah that ended up with the generation of Salah ad-Din. What I feel is that when it comes to lack of knowledge and lack of understanding, it just I cannot name anyone who I wish, you know, okay, this is someone I would follow. There are many scholars who, in terms of when it comes to fiqh, like, you know, al-ibadat, al-akhlaq, definitely, you know, they are very good, mashallah. They provide us with good stuff. We get to listen to them. But after what we have witnessed after the military coup, after the revolution, this is not enough. You know, this is not enough.
No,
you're right. They've been refrained from a long time.
But, you know, it's even funny that they won't even do it for someone who's in popular culture like Jamal Khashoggi, you know? They won't even speak up about him. I mean, that's someone that even the leftists and liberals are all over, you know, very... They're protesting out, you know, in a very loud voice. And usually when they do it... you know, a lot of the Muslim voices start joining in and start joining in the chorus. You know, and it's funny because we're at such a pathetic state that we have to wait for cues, so that we can initiate our outrage. But anyway, but I'm glad that you joined us this evening. I know we took up a lot of your time, and it's very late for where you are. Do you have any closing thoughts? Anything regarding the future?
Thank you very much for having me. I don't know. I try to put as many ideas as possible. I hope that you guys continue what you're doing. I hope that, you know, there's huge amount of work that needs to be done in the Muslim community in the US and in the West, and there is a window and of opportunity, and I wish that we can see, you know, much more impact, and not just on, you know, in the West, but also in the Muslim world as well. And maybe one day, you know, we're gonna have these scholars and role models and leaders that we're gonna follow.
I mean,
we're gonna make sure that's right, inshallah.
And also, before we conclude, man, out of respect for your father and your brother, is there anything you want to inform us of them and let's raise awareness about? Is there anything happening that, you know, is there any way that we can help, the Muslim community at large can help?
Well, the situation currently is very difficult. So we expect to hear the final verdict on their case very soon. So they were already sentenced to life, to 25 years, but the higher court canceled their decision, and now there is another case that there's a retrial, and the retrial is going to end very soon, and there's like a final verdict. There is a campaign that we do. The website is freehaddad.org, or you can go for my Twitter
freehaddad.org.
freehaddad.org. Free HADDAD.org. There is if you go to Twitter and you just write Free Haddad, hashtag Free Haddad, you can find the stuff and press releases and so on. my family, and specifically my father and brother, have a very interesting story when it comes to dealing with the West, because my father was he met with President Obama. He was the only Egyptian official who's not a president who met with President Obama.
Wow.
In the past 50 years. He met him in the White House in 2012.
I knew Obama was a secret Muslim.
Yeah, I mean, it was very interesting to hear the fact that there's a conspiracy theory about Obama afterwards. My brother met with David Cameron, the Prime Minister of the UK. So it's just like my brother used to work for Clinton Foundation, and so they had these things. When it comes to dealing with the West, if anyone out there who knows them, who dealt with them, who knows people who knows them, who knows people who dealt with them, if you can just get the message across to any former official or anyone who knows any of them, and they can just raise awareness, or maybe try to contact the Egyptians and tell them, easy on them, go easy on them. But that's this is the kind of what we're trying to campaign. Is just I'm trying to get my father to the hospital. I'm trying to see if there is anything that I can do. But this is what we can do for them. They paid a heavy price, and that heavy price, may Allah reward them for it. Inshallah. And may Allah accept this as well. We did. There are many things that we had to do and we didn't do. Many things that we had to knew, but we didn't. So hopefully, inshallah, there will be a change in what's happening in Egypt and other countries. Inshallah, maybe in the Middle East, and hopefully around the world.
All right. Thank you again for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and include your Twitter contact if anyone wants to reach out to Brother Abdullah here. You can reach out to him in the description below, and freehaddad.org. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. For Brother Abdullah and Sheikh Amr, my name is Sim. We'll see y'all next time. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.